So today we've got a really special treat for you. We got this guy, Matt Cremona. He's in my shop. We've been here for 6 days. It's like the tail end. We're pulling each other's hair out. We need some space. Anyway, we got together to do some stuff for the guild, but we decided to do a couple of free projects and collaborate on them and get as far as we possibly can. So I think the name of the game with this was get as much as we can done in 2 days, right? Both of these projects have about 2 days worth of work into them, so they're not 100% complete as you see them right now. But I needed a new gate in the backyard, so we built a garden gate out of white oak, and there's some interesting angle problems to fit it and make it look good. So this is a really fun project. We'll get to that in a second. But Matt, why don't you tell us about the bar stool that you made, because that thing is a beauty.
Thank you. So the top of the stool is made from a piece of walnut that's been power carved to give a nice scoop here for your butt. And then for the legs, we got some cherry that tapers from thick down to thin, and then it's all tied together with this nice little footrest down here that's turned from a piece of babinga.
So if you want to check out Matt's bar stool, head to his channel. It's going to be a great build. And we've got another treat, another special guest. My buddy Andy Klein was here to help me with the initial design work. So let's go check out the old crappy gate and see what we can do with it. So Andy's going to help me lay out this gate because unlike things in the shop where everything is square and you could design everything to be perfect, here in my backyard, we've got a fence or a gate here that is anything but square. It sort of tapers out on both sides, and we have to decide what the best strategy is to get a gate that actually doesn't look stupid.
So the problem is this comes out a full 1.25 inches, so you'd be 1.25 inches thicker at the top, and that kind of a taper on a small piece would really draw the eye. So the next option was leave this flush to the wall, so 1/4 inch out on top, and just frame up a perfectly square box and then trim it. Now you're going to have the same problem with the rail on the side of the door. That's really going to draw the eye.
If we're like a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch over that length, I think we could get away with that and scribing it, but if we're going to be taking 1.25 inches off of those verticals, that's going to be really, really obvious. It's going to look weird.
So now the current plan is to start with this side vertical piece, have it flush against the side and constant thickness so that it's out of plumb, and then just take the top and bottom rails, put them in place, scribe a line with that funny angle, and sneak up on it on the miter saw, so that we actually have something framed up that matches on the sides, constant thickness, and compensates for those funny angles.
And this is kind of a who cares what the angle is, just make it fit and make it work. As far as these horizontal pieces, we're not even going for level because the ground isn't level. So it's most important that it just looks level and looks parallel to the ground. So this is going to be a wacky door. Like if you put this door anywhere else, it's going to look really stupid. But here, we're going to kind of create the illusion of a square door. All right, so we just got to do some rough layout, pick the best boards we can. We've got some white oak in there, so we'll get cutting. We'll start by prepping the stock for the door stiles. These are going to be really thick, so each one will require 2 pieces of 1/4 stock. For something like a garden gate, you'll want to use a waterproof glue like Type-On 3. The 2 stiles can be glued and clamped at the same time. Once the glue is dry, the stiles are milled to 3.5 inches thick, 4 inches wide, and 54 inches long. Now we can mill the horizontal rail stock to final thickness at the planer. The top and bottom rails are 6 inches wide. The middle rail is 4 inches wide. The top rail will receive some decorative curves. I draw the curve I want on a piece of ply and then cut out the shape. Now I can use the plywood as a template. By using the same template and just flipping it over to draw on the other side, I can guarantee perfect symmetry. The shape is cut at the bandsaw, and refined at the spindle sander. Now with 1/2 inch spacers taped to the existing vertical supports, my buddy Matt Cremona will help me keep the stiles in place while we scribe the rails. I already have guidelines on my stiles to let me know where the rails should be. A few quick clamps will hold the pieces in place while we scribe. And now we can repeat that process for the middle and lower rails.
Looks terrible.
All we need to do now is cut to our lines with the miter saw, and most of them are off from 90. I find it easiest to get my angle right first while staying away from the line. Once the angle looks good, I can sneak up on the final dimension. The great part about this method is that we don't have to even think about the angles. We just need to cut to the line. I'll be using some big fat dominoes for this one, 2 per joint. As we said previously, dowels are a good alternative to the dominoes in this application. Even though these angles are off from 90, it doesn't matter. The mortises will be cut perpendicular to the shoulder. The corresponding mortises are cut in the stiles. To make the final glue up easier, I'll pre-glue the tenons into the mortises on the rails. Now we can cut the decorative profile on the top of the stiles. To accommodate panels, we'll need to cut some 1/2-inch grooves, and I'll use a slot cutting bit to make the groove on the curved top rail. For the rest of the grooves, I'll use a 1/2-inch spiral bit and an edge guide. The bottom section of the gate will have a ship-lapped panel, so we'll need a bunch of 1/2-inch boards. At the table saw, we'll cut a small rabbet on the sides of each board so that they nest together perfectly. Each piece receives a rabbet on each edge, with the exception of the outer boards. Those receive only 1 rabbet. Because the stiles are at a slight angle, the outer panel board needs to have a taper added to it. My panel is a little bit wider than it needs to be, so after I drop everything in place during a dry assembly, I could look at the top and mark the cut line that's about 1/8 of an inch short of a 1/2 inch, giving the panel some room to move. Another dry assembly just to test fit. For the top slats, I decided that adding more angles would be a good way to visually disguise the fact that the gate isn't square. And the only way I could wrap my brain around this was to make some cardboard templates. Once I have the shapes I like, I can start to cut out the slats. With the slats in place, you can see how the angles make it impossible to tell that we're off at all. So now I can mark the location of each slat on the rails. To scribe the top to length, I drop each slat in its position behind the rail and then scribe it at the top. And to account for the groove in the top rail, the actual cut line will be a 1/2 inch up from that point. I'll install the slats and clamp the gate securely. And now it's time for a little trickery. Cutting mortise and tenon joints for these slats would have been a real pain, especially in that curved top. So I'll cut some scrap stock to fit perfectly in the empty spaces between the slats. Each piece is custom fit, giving each slat a little bit of room to move. Yeah, it's tedious, but it's actually easier than cutting all of those mortises. For the top rail, we'll first need to establish a vertical straight line on our slats. If we don't do this, the slats will be stuck in the top rail due to the wedged shape, and I still need to remove them after the filler strips are installed. Once the filler strips are dry, we need to flush them to the surface. This is easy enough on the mid-rail. As you can see, if you get a nice grain match, the filler strips are almost impossible to see. For the top rail, I skew the block plane to get as much of the bulk as possible and then finish it off with some sanding. Now I'm going to add another detail that I hope helps this gate last even longer. I'm going to bevel the outside edges on both sides to help promote water runoff. It's slight, and I don't even know if it'll make a difference, but it seems like a good idea in theory. The same treatment is done to the bottom rail. Another Hail Mary idea is to drill some holes in the bottom rail. No matter what I do, water is likely to get into the bottom groove. I'm hoping that by drilling the holes all the way through the bottom rail, it'll not only give water a way to escape, but it'll also provide a little air exchange to help dry trapped moisture. The shiplap panel will likely develop gaps as the boards expand and contract over the seasons. A light chamfer on the ends helps make the gaps less noticeable. Any exposed edges receive an 1/8 inch roundover. Now all of my parts are sanded thoroughly in preparation for the finish. So I've got Matt here to talk a little bit about finishes with us because he recently did a farmhouse table last year and it sits outside in the Minnesota winter and snow and has been beaten up and it seems to be doing okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's lots of different finishes. I've got just a small sampling of things you could use on an outdoor project, but what did you wind up doing and how did it hold up?
Sure. So I ended up using the CPES, which is this stuff here. It's just basically a penetrating epoxy, really thin epoxy. It's almost like the consistency of like water.
Yeah.
So it gets sucked in really deep, hardens, and then solidifies the fibers of the wood a little more, which also provides a good base for a top coat. So the top coat that I used was Epifanes gloss. I used 5 coats of that, and then I put 2 coats of the matte top coat on top of that, and that's gonna knock down that gloss because otherwise it's just like, it's too much.
Super shiny.
It's so shiny. And
Yeah, light hits it, it'll blind you.
Yeah. They say to put 2 coats on because if you put 1 coat on, you're gonna miss spots because it all looks wet anyway.
See all the holidays.
So the second coat is just to make sure you get it all.
Yeah, okay.
But the table is holding up really well. It looks exactly the same as the day I finished it.
Great.
A year ago. It's been through a whole summer and a whole winter in Minnesota. So those are pretty good extremes.
And that sounds exactly like what I need to do because I do not want to have to refinish this gate a year from now. This is not the kind of project that would be fun to refinish. So, all right, let's go slap on some finish. I usually don't stain my projects, especially outdoor projects. But in order to match the rest of the woodwork in the backyard, I do need to add a little bit of color. I'm using Thompson's Timber Oil, which is an oil-based stain that contains some pigments and UV inhibitors. Application is simple, just brush it on and wipe off the excess. Everything but the mortise and tenon joints receives a nice coating. I'll let that dry for 24 hours. CPES is a 2-part epoxy that you mix in a 1-to-1 ratio. As you can see, this stuff is much thinner than most epoxies, which is what allows it to absorb deep into the wood. By the way, you must wear a respirator when you use this stuff because the fumes are powerful. CPES applies like any other film finish, so I like to use a brush to apply it. The manufacturer recommends 2 coats because the first one usually absorbs so quickly, but because I have some oil stain on the surface already, I'm going to do just 1 coat. The key with this stuff is to apply the varnish coat before the epoxy is fully cured, which will literally glue the varnish to the wood. So I'll start by diluting the Epifanes about 50% with mineral spirits. Each subsequent coat gets less dilute until I finally add the last coat or 2 at full strength. I then follow up with 2 coats of the matte product. In video, this all goes by quickly, but in reality, with only 1 coat of finish per day, and of course sanding between coats, you're looking at about 7 to 10 days of a time investment. Now we could think about installation.
And also today, I'm making a stop sign. That's a triangle. Dad!
Now before I can assemble the gate, I need to make sure I know where my hinges are going, so it's a whole lot easier to do this when I just have a single post instead of the entire gate. So I've just got a shim on the bottom, keeping the door at the correct height, and then of course the shims on the side, keeping it the correct distance from this vertical support post. And I've got my new hinges here, so all I really need to do is pick where I want these hinges to lay out, put them in place, and then mark with a pencil so we know exactly where we're going to drill. So my top hinge, I've got some choices here. I could put it up here, I could put it down a little bit, but my top rail is gonna go here. And I don't really want this to be this high. It's too close to the top. So I'll put it just under the location of the top rail. Now I'll do the same thing for the lower hinge, and once again, it doesn't need to be right where that bottom rail is. I can bring it up just a little bit and mark those locations. To make the hinge connection even stronger, I'm increasing the size of the hole slightly to accommodate 5/16 inch bolts. Instead of lag bolts, I'm opting for threaded holes made with Wood Whisperer thread taps. Simply pre-drill at each hole location with the appropriately sized bit, and then cut the threads with the tap. With holes this deep, it's absolutely critical that you get all of the dust out of the holes, or it'll prevent the bolt from going to full depth. Now we can assemble. I'm using epoxy since I need as much working time as I can get. I'll start by attaching the lower rail to one style. The shiplap goes in without glue. Now for the middle rail. Getting the top rail and slats installed was a bit of a dance, but that's why I used epoxy. To help prevent denting, I tape some batting material to the clamps. Since the bolt heads are kinda ugly, I'll spray paint them black before attaching the hinges. With some wax on the threads, I use a drill to slowly drive the bolts home. You do have to be careful not to strip out the threads, so when the bolt stops, you stop. That's 15 bolts going 2 inches deep into white oak. Those hinges aren't going anywhere. Back outside, I'll use the lag bolts for the hinge connection, so I'll just pre-drill for those. I weighed the gate, and it's coming in at a solid 100 pounds. Good thing I ate my pasta today. I'll use a piece of ply on the patio to keep the gate at the proper height and line up my hinges with the holes. Now I can drive the lags. Well, it worked. I gotta admit, I'm kind of surprised. It's a very heavy gate, but with 3 hinges and the capacity of each hinge, I have more than enough to hold this thing in place. The thing I know I'm gonna have to replace at some point here is this support board that's connected to the wall. It is made from a softwood species, and I think over time it's just going to cause the door to sag. So it won't be sag coming from the hinges, it'll be this thing pulling away or sort of stretching away from the wall. So this will be a future upgrade. I still need to put a handle on here and connect the latch system, but for now, this thing swings freely and it feels secure, certainly looks good, and this is mission accomplished. Now, the real question is, from that side, can we tell that it's a crooked gate? I don't know, let's take a look. Well, I guess if you're looking for it, you can certainly find the angle, but if you're not, I don't think you're really gonna notice it. The eye is really gonna see the curve at the top. It's gonna see the angle of these panels here. I think there's enough distraction for the eye that you're not even gonna notice that angle on the side there. So pretty cool idea that Andy came up with, and I think it works for this space. So other than replacing this piece here and adding a little bit more hardware, I'd say we're done. Pretty good color match, very heavy gate. I don't recommend building stuff out of square normally, but in this case it works. So thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this project. We'll see you later.